Peace, everyone.
It's the good man. The end justifies the means. A phrase we have heard so often, one that has clung to our minds as if it were an absolute truth. Yet, the deeper we dive into it, the clearer it becomes that we are not speaking of a passing statement, but of values, of ethics, of will, of the very actions that shape our lives. So, does the end truly justify the means? Or can the means, in fact, destroy the very end itself? Although Machiavelli never explicitly stated this phrase in The Prince, it was merely an inference drawn from his political theory. The same happened with Darwin. Most people believe he explicitly declared that humans descended from apes, yet he never stated such a thing. This was rather the interpretation of Darwinists after him, a theory we shall explain later on. The end justifies the means, a phrase we have heard countless times lingering in our minds as if it were an absolute truth. Yet, the more we delve into it, the more we realize we are not speaking of a passing expression, but of values, of ethics, of will, of the very actions that shape our lives. So, does the end truly justify the means? Or is the means itself capable of undermining the very end it seeks to achieve?
Linguistically, the word end means the goal or the desired result. For example, your end in studying is success, and your end in working is earning. Thus, the end concerns itself only with results. It seeks results. But the manner in which these results are reached does not belong to the end itself, nor can it belong to it, for it would be illogical for the end to look at the actions. The end is nothing but a goal, a result. As for who is responsible for actions, and for determining how those actions are carried out, this is something we shall discuss more deeply. For understanding it will reveal to us whether the end justifies the means or not. As we said earlier, the end is nothing more than a goal or a result, without delving into the nature of the act itself. A person whose end is success may realize that this end cannot be achieved without schooling. Thus, the way one studies to reach that end of success depends entirely on the moral values that person holds. Many students who hold this end, the end of success, may achieve it either through cheating or through diligence and hard work. Both paths lead to the same desired end, the end of success. But here, we must pause and ask, does cheating, as a means, find its justification in the end of success, or not? If a person passes the exam through cheating, then the very essence of the end, success, has not truly been achieved. For being preoccupied with the mere appearance of success, he forgets that his end must align with the true meaning of success for the means to be genuine. Thus, though he may appear to have succeeded, in truth, he has not, because success itself carries its own end, and that end was never fulfilled. Even if he passes the exam by such means, he has failed in the essence of his end, success as the sign of knowledge and understanding. I know this may seem complex, but imagine it with me. The end of success exists for a purpose, that a person may gain knowledge. To reach it through cheating is to disrupt the very purpose of that end. In other words, your success becomes useless.
Will is the true companion, the very reality of the end. The end cannot be realized without will. You may imagine will and end as two sides of the same coin. If one side is lost, the coin loses its value and it no longer functions. In short, an end without will is nothing but an empty dream, without use, without weight, never to be fulfilled. For the gateway to action is will. A person who lacks will cannot bring forth any act. Consider this example. I may hold the end of rising from my bed, yet, if I do not possess the will to rise, that end will remain suspended, never realized. Thus, action is in truth directly bound to will, and only indirectly to the end. The means is the act itself. It does not arise from the end, but from the will that resides within a person. We do not know from where the end arises, nor is there any proof that it comes from a specific place. But will springs from the human values a person holds, and it is these values that determine whether one's actions will follow virtuous and noble principles or corrupt and depraved ones. Though the end, in its essence, moves in a single direction, it is the will that reflects the image of that end into action. Two students may share the same end goal at school, yet one is driven by a will steeped in cheating and deceit, while the other is guided by a pure will that compels him toward effort and dedication. Both may arrive at success in form, but only the untainted will of the virtuous aligns in truth with the very essence of success itself. When ends converge with one another, there can be but a single means to reach that end, a single passage between them. Imagine it with me, like a bridge connecting 2 points. Crossing to the other side cannot occur except through the path that binds the two ends together. Aristotle said, "The end is that for the sake of which everything exists, and will is what drives man to pursue this end through reason." Thus, Aristotle's view was close to the one I now express. The harmony between end and will must be rational, though he did not claim that the end itself holds yet another hidden end, nor that the essence of one goal possesses its own separate purpose. His thought leaned in that direction, for he believed that reason is what guides us toward the end, but only through a rightly ordered will. It was not only Aristotle who believed that the end must be pursued through rational will. Kant, too, held a firm stance regarding the corruption and instability of ends. In his most famous maxim, he declared, "Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always as an end, never merely as a means." Kant believed that a corrupted means inevitably corrupts the end itself. Thus, the end must be preserved through a right and virtuous means, never through a tainted one. For the corrupt means does not merely spoil the end, it generates strange and troubling consequences that ripple far beyond it.
Action is the drawing sketched by the end through the hand of will. It is the means by which the image of the end is brought into being. Yet such action cannot be realized without power, and it is nearly impossible to imagine power accompanied by action but without an end. For in that case, such power would be incapable of bringing forth any deed. For the true problem at this point lies not in power, but in action itself. For action requires a motive to be done. Even if a person possesses power, yet lacks the motive or the end to direct it towards something, that power will remain unused. Take, for example, a person who has the strength to push a stone and move it. That strength cannot be employed without an act. The act cannot occur without will, and will itself cannot exist without an end. This sequence is indispensable if action is to be realized through power. For a person needs an end in order to possess will, and needs will in order to act, and needs power in order for that act to be carried out. Thus, the bond between power and action is essential. The end may be present and the will may be present, yet if power is absent, then even if you desire to act, the act cannot be fulfilled, and so the end remains unrealized. As I mentioned earlier, the end itself is divided into two: a conceptual end, which serves as the initial drive or the starting point, and a final end, which is the result itself. For example, a person holds in his mind the image of an end, the end of moving a stone. When the will to move it arises, and the act is carried out with the strength that enables the action to be done, the outcome of this process, the actual movement of the stone, is itself an end. This is the final end, the true end. For the initial end was but a conceptual one, existing in the mind and not in reality, while the final end is that which comes to exist in the world. Thus, it is necessary to understand this sequence if we are to grasp the nature of the final end. It seems that the actions we perform in our daily lives, if we contemplate them closely, reveal themselves to be profoundly complex, not something to be accepted at face value so easily. When I first sought to understand action, I could not grasp it until I first understood the end. For actions by their very nature cannot be judged as the sole determinant of their essence. One may witness an action that appears evil, yet its outcome may turn out to be good.
This does not necessarily mean that the person is evil. It may be that a good end first took shape in his mind, and he sought to realize that image. Yet he found no path but an evil act to bring forth that good vision. Take, for example, one who kills another. Killing, by its very nature, is an evil act. Yet this person intended to free people from the harm and tyranny of that man. The first end was good, drawn in his mind, but it could only be achieved through an evil act, namely, killing.
And once the act was done, the initial end, the good image, came to pass. And you may also see a person performing a good act, yet it produces an evil outcome, because the end that drove him was itself corrupt. This does not mean that the person is good simply because the act appeared good. Therefore, each of us must understand this truth and grasp it well.